How did young French au pair Sophie Lionnet pass away at the hands of her employers, Sabrina Koudier and Sam Medouni? We often romanticize moving to a different country to start a new life, but things don't always pan out like you envision. For Sophie Lionnet, that dream was taken from her, and I assure you, she never saw it coming. Let's dive into the details. I'm Brandy, and this is Killer Bites. This case starts with Sabrina Koudier, who was born in 1983 in Algeria, but her family moved to Paris, France at some point in her childhood. When she was 18 years old, Sabrina met Wissem Medouni, who went by the name Sam. Sam and Sabrina began dating, and it became very serious. They moved to London, where Sabrina worked a number of odd jobs, such as an au pair, which is basically a live-in nanny. She also worked as a makeup artist and worked for a bank. Through time, Sabrina found success as a stylist, a fashion designer, and a songwriter. On the outside, it appeared that Sabrina was living a very glamorous lifestyle. She was described as kind and soft-spoken, but little did anyone know she had a lot going on below the surface. Sabrina and Sam had a very on-again, off-again relationship that eventually fizzled out. That's when Sabrina met Mark Walton. Mark Walton was very successful and well-known in the music industry. He was previously in a band called Boyzone. He later went on to manage a group called Blue, as well as work with a number of different celebrities, such as Lady Gaga and Enrique Iglesias. Mark and Sabrina actually have a kind of funny story of how they met. They were both in line at the bank, and Sabrina asked the teller who the guy was behind her. The bank teller said he didn't know. Then when Mark went up to the teller, he asked him the same thing, if he knew the woman who had just come up to the window. The teller said he didn't really know her, but it was funny because she had just asked about him as well. Sabrina and Mark officially met, and Sabrina asked Mark out to a bar later that night. When Mark arrived, he saw Sabrina there with like 12 other men. It seems that Sabrina had conned all these men into thinking they were going on a date, but really she was there to pitch them on this sketchy cell phone plan that she was trying to sell. And it was a really bad deal. You had to pay like $800 just to sign up, then some other hidden fees, and then you still had to pay monthly fees. Anyway, Mark was still taken with Sabrina, so he signed up for the cell phone plan and tried to work his way into her heart. Mark and Sabrina began dating. Sabrina opened up to Mark like never before. She told him of her troubled past. She even confessed to him that she had previously been raped by 2 of her uncles when she was younger. Mark was happy that Sabrina was opening up to him, and he had a serious desire to protect Sabrina and take care of her. Soon enough, Mark moved into Sabrina's apartment, so they could take their relationship to the next level. But upon moving in, things got difficult to say the least. This is when Sabrina's crazy side came out. She would frequently have violent episodes. For example, Mark once woke up to Sabrina full force punching him in the face. And when he asked her why she was hitting him, she just said he was snoring and it was bothering her. Sabrina's jealous side began to creep out as well. Sabrina had a child from a previous relationship, and she needed help taking care of her daughter, so she hired a nanny. Sabrina started to accuse Mark of having an affair with the nanny, and ultimately let her go. This happened with 4 different nannies. She would hire them and immediately assume Mark was sleeping with them, and Sabrina would go off the rails. Sabrina hid cameras in the home to try and catch them in the act, but she never found any evidence of an affair. I think most people would break up after being accused of cheating over and over again, but Mark still felt strongly for Sabrina. He loved her and just felt that she had been burned in the past, and that's what was driving these delusions. Mark was happy to stay with Sabrina and work on their relationship. Sabrina became pregnant, and Mark was ecstatic. He loved Sabrina's child from her previous relationship and treated her as his own. He was over the moon to expand their family and have a child of his own. During the pregnancy, Sabrina told Mark her mother was sick and that she must go and visit her. She left London and headed for France. After some time in France, Sabrina phoned Mark and nonchalantly told him that she had miscarried the baby. Mark was devastated and concerned about Sabrina for her physical health and her mental health. He felt something was off by how she reacted to the loss of her child, so he decided to check in with other members of the family to see how she was doing. Mark called Sabrina's brother to ask how Sabrina was holding up after the miscarriage. And Sabrina's brother was like, "What are you talking about? The baby's alive. She gave birth like a few days ago. She's in the hospital. The baby's in the hospital. They're fine." Despite lying about the death of their child, Mark still stayed with Sabrina. In 2013, Mark put money down for a deposit on a flat in Southfield and prepaid the first few months' rent for Sabrina to live in and take care of the children, while he had to move to the US for work-related reasons. Eventually, Sabrina just cut all contact with Mark and cut him out of her life. In return, Mark cut her off financially. Sabrina was pissed. In retaliation, she called up all Mark's major clients and told them he was a pedophile. She also filed somewhere along the lines of 30 police reports on Sam, one including that Sam had sexually assaulted her cat, even though Sabrina never had a cat. For some unknown reason, Sabrina made all these false accusations and tried to ruin his life. Sabrina was on a downward spiral, taking her anger out on those closest around her. She became well known in her quiet town of Southfields for all the wrong reasons. She would litter, harass shop owners, and use her car to block people's driveways. She just became a very bitter person. Sabrina tried to move on. She was still living in the flat Mark had gotten her and taking care of the kids when she got back with her previous boyfriend, Sam. Sam worshipped the ground Sabrina walked on. He was somewhat submissive to her. He didn't even mind when he found out Sabrina would frequently cheat on him. Sam loved her and wanted to be with her and tried to help him as best as he could with raising her children. But Sabrina and Sam needed help taking care of the kids, so in 2016 they hired an au pair, live-in nanny, named Sophie Lionnet. Sophie was a sweet girl from France. Her friends would describe her as beautiful, quiet, shy, selfless, and a giving person. She was very warm and had a maternal instinct. She knew from such a young age that she wanted to work with children, so when she turned 18, she took a childcare course, and from there, she became an au pair for Sabrina. Sophie was excited to be able to work with Sabrina's kids, as well as learn English while living in the UK. Unfortunately, au pairs don't get paid very well, so Sophie was only making £63 a month, but they would provide her free housing and food. At first, everything was great. Sophie fell in love with the kids right away, and she got on with Sabrina too. Sophie would spend her days taking the kids to and from school and the park. She even helped the kids make a sort of lemonade stand to teach them hard work and the value of $1. Sophie became friendly with the neighbors and local shop owners around town. Then, sort of out of the blue, Sabrina started to become more demanding of Sophie. She would add on more chores to her to-do list. She would force her to work longer hours. She was averaging 80 hours a week and only making £63 a month. She also started withholding food from Sophie. Sophie became rail thin and she started to look disheveled in her appearance. As I mentioned, she became friends with the locals, and they began to notice a change in Sophie. One day, Sophie went into the local fish and chip shop, and the owner asked her how she was doing. She was very honest with him and told him things weren't great. Her mother wasn't doing well back in France, and that she was overwhelmed with work, but perhaps she just needed to manage her time better. The owner took mercy on Sophie going through a rough patch and gave her the fish and chips free of charge that day. Somehow, Sabrina found out Sophie got the meal for free, and she stormed into the shop and yelled at the owner, and then yelled at Sophie. Then she forcefully grabbed Sophie's arm and dragged her out of the shop. The owner was concerned at Sabrina's reaction and how she had treated Sophie. So actually, the next time Sophie came into his shop, he offered to pay for a plane ticket to fly back to France to be free of Sabrina. Sophie thanked him but politely declined. After that, Sabrina really let Sophie have it. She made her stay awake for hours on end, refused to feed her, made her move her bed into a tiny hallway closet to live. And then Sabrina began to accuse Sophie of having an affair with her ex, Mark Walton. Now, Mark was still living in the United States and had not been back to the UK and had never met Sophie, so the accusation was insane. But Sabrina had fully convinced herself of this delusion. She even managed to convince Sam that it was true as well. Sabrina was convinced that Sophie would let Mark into the house while they were sleeping and that he would go around and inject them all with heroin so that he could sexually assault the children. Once again, Mark was still in the US. But in retaliation, Sabrina would relentlessly interrogate Sophie about the alleged affair, gang, and sexual assault. She would call Sophie all sorts of derogatory names and berate her for hours. Sophie confided in her mom, told her the situation, and told her she wanted to come home. Her mom purchased her a plane ticket and sent it in the mail. Unfortunately, Sabrina intercepted this mail and ripped up the plane ticket, and she didn't stop there. Sabrina found and hid Sophie's passport so she couldn't leave the country. She took away Sophie's cell phone so she couldn't contact anyone. She stopped paying her, so she had no money, no food, no phone, and no way out of this hellhole. Sabrina had roped Sam into her delusions, and the two of them would continuously abuse Sophie. They would physically beat her with whatever they had available in the house. They would keep her awake for days on end, and they would try to get her to falsely confess to things she didn't do, like let Mark into the house. They started waterboarding Sophie when she wouldn't confess to the things she was being accused of. It all came to a head one day. They held Sophie underwater for too long, and she drowned. Immediately following Sophie's death, Sabrina and Sam had relations just mere feet from her body before stuffing Sophie into a suitcase and stashing her in a shed behind their flats. Days later, they felt they needed to do something with Sophie's body, so they made a bonfire and attempted to cover it up by barbecuing chicken in the backyard at the same time. The neighbors phoned the police reporting a large fire and foul smell coming from Sabrina's residence. When the fire department arrived, Sam told them not to worry, they're just cooking chicken in the back. The fire department said they still needed to go back there and check it out. They went back there to find they were indeed barbecuing chicken, but they also had an out-of-control fire happening at the same time. They put the fire out, and through the ashes discovered bits of human remains, including fingers and a nose. Originally, Sam confessed to the whole thing, stating that Sabrina had nothing to do with the death of their nanny, Sophie Lionnet. But his story quickly changed to he was taking a nap, and when he woke up, Sabrina had ended Sophie's life. The post-mortem test results indicated that Sophie was in bad shape before her death. Apparently, she had several cracked ribs, as well as suffered fractures to her sternum days before her death. Sabrina and Sam had a joint trial. At the trial, they both pointed fingers and blamed each other for Sophie's demise, but they were ultimately both convicted for Sophie's death. In court, Sophie's father spoke out saying, "If only I had known what would happen to her at the hands of Sabrina and Wissem, that she would undergo so much physical and mental torture, that her so young life was so selfishly and unnecessarily taken from her. I would have never encouraged her to leave. I would still have my little girl. She couldn't stand seeing others suffering, and it breaks my heart to know that she was abused to the end of her life. It was Sophie who suffered in silence, beaten, and receiving wounds incompatible with life. She was imprisoned. Sabrina and Wissem have not only stolen the life of my only daughter so brutally and without remorse, they have also stolen mine, my sleep, my happiness, my peace of mind, and my future." That's all I have for you today. I'm Brandy, and thank you for watching another episode of Killer Bites.